This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place to be in
Uncharted, where we go to other areas of the wrestling universe and figure out what if something didn't go a certain way, or what if somebody replaced somebody, or what would happen if this guy was a champion instead of this guy, such, and such. Welcome to Through the Looking Glass. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. It is October, mid-October here in the Northeast. Of course, the first 5 minutes of every episode of Through the Looking Glass usually involves the weather. You know, it's like one of those like, hey, what's the weather? Right, but this guy and I get so mad because, well, I get mad, he doesn't, because his winters are my springs, and my winters are his nightmares because they never happen. So, good evening, Thunder from Down Under, Mr. Dave Hall. How are you?
I'm doing well, Scott. It's yes, we the weather report becomes a bit of a fixture, and look, we're at that time of the year where we've probably got very similar weather conditions anyway across the board. So those crossover times. So, but it's good to be back. It's good to be with you, and it's good to be with all our listeners. And we're glad that you all join us once again, and we hope that you are enjoying these monthly drops, and we hope that you continue to tune in.
We've been having a blast, as we always do. We thank you for your support. Every month, we're almost hitting, what are we up to, 3 years almost?
3 years, yeah. We've just hit 3 years.
Wow. And we haven't repeated. Well, we shouldn't have to, but we've had some good things. This month is some interesting conversations. We're almost kind of we're doing some champion switcheroos. Looking ahead, by the way, to a couple of months from now, possibly in December, we might do a little mailbag action. Kind of goes in line with my other show that I do here on the network, which is, of course, Wrestle Tracks with Greg Diener. Of course, we have voted. You have all voted. And thank you for your participation. Do you vote, Dave? I think you vote, right?
I do. I try to.
Okay. This month, we will be doing Halloween Havoc 1992. Spin the wheel, make the deal. So that's going to be this month's, and that will drop on Halloween. So usually in December on Wrestle Tracks, we do a fan vote where not only do you vote, but you also pick the things that are going to go on the ballot. So kind of in line with that, we'll post something on the Facebook page in November, but maybe we'll do a little mailbag action in the month of December. Get some questions from all of you before we reset for 2025. Dave, so looking ahead, because I finally want to do it, since the Royal Rumble next year is February 1st, can we rebook some sold outs then in January?
Oh. We might have to consider that, or New Year's Revolutions, or
New Year's Revolutions. Oh man, this is pretty great. We'll see what happens, folks. Anyway, let's talk about October. So this month, I'd like to think in honor of one of our world champions in WWE, and that of course is Mr. Cody Devontae Rhodes, who will be wrestling an absolutely useless match at Crown Jewel, and then another match he probably has no business being in at Survivor Series, because he'll probably be in the Bloodline War Games match. I hope
he's not in the War Games match. I really they stay away from that. But I feel that they've almost I feel like they've booked themselves into a corner, because they don't want Cody to lose, but they don't want Gunther to lose either. So I don't know. Right. It'd be very interesting. Actually, it makes it for an interesting match, though.
Yes, no, it does. It does. And but we'll see what happens. In any event, we've got some interesting scenarios to go to. We have two main ones that we're going to talk about tonight, and then if we have time, we have a third one that probably, I don't want to say would be unrealistic, but it'd be kind of hard, but maybe not. I think it'd be very interesting. So we're talking about cases where they're actually kind of a mishmash. One involves swapping out one national wrestling icon for another. The second one involves a heel turn that happened in one promotion, but what would have happened if it occurred in another? And then we got a third one, which we'll try to maybe we'll have time at the end, where a guy who had to retire due to medical issues didn't. By the way, I got a lot of good comments, Dave, from personal, like through private messages and stuff about our Sid episode.
That's good.
A lot of people loved our Sid episode, so we thank you, everyone. We're blessed. I thought that was one of our best. I mean, I think every show we do is great, but I particularly enjoyed that Sid episode. I thought we did a really good job in that Sid episode. I really do.
It was really good opportunity to just reflect on who he was too. It was I really enjoyed that.
Yep, I did. I was doing a show with the PIC, Mr. Zero, on the No So. We were drafting Attitude Era tag teams, and he loved our rebook of Sid in 92 through 94. Loved it. He would have been so pumped if it was Sid that slammed Yoko on the Intrepid. He was very excited that we thought of that. Very excited. So, in any event, why don't you get us started, Dave, with this first one? Because this one's fascinating. In a lot of ways, it's not cut and dry. There's a lot of variables, but I think we did have some fun. So why don't you get us started?
All right. So in this month's topics have come out of some interviews that have happened in the world of the modern world of wrestling just recently, and the first one comes out of the Vince McMahon Netflix series. I don't know how many of our listeners have watched it. Honestly, I actually have not had the opportunity to see it down here in Australia. It just hasn't been released. Yeah,
I watched it.
Was it worth it?
If you want to, I'll get into it with you now because I love you, Dave. But if you want to hear my other real deep dive, check out a couple of episodes ago of Police Be Nation's main event. Myself and the Boogie of the Bayou, Mr. Andrew Reich, talked about it. But I'll get into it again. In terms of a wrestling fan, there's really, I'll be honest, not much you don't already know. It's if you're not a wrestling fan, a lot of this crap's gonna go way over your head because it is very carny, kayfabe, not kayfabe, but it's a lot of wrestling, and they do get into obviously the big things of the early 90s. Obviously they get into his childhood and his upbringing and working for Vince Sr. in the 50s and 60s, booking the promotion in Maine, and then obviously being an announcer and then buying and then needing WrestleMania, et cetera, et cetera. They really do get into the steroid trial and the Ring Boys and all that stuff in the early to mid 90s. Attitude Era, etc., his relationship with his kids and that kind of thing. So honestly, most of it is not anything new. And unfortunately, all of the stuff that has come out over the last 3 years happened after this stuff was shot, and they had to do like kind of a editing kind of situation at the end. So, I would watch it, Dave, for you because you're obviously a junkie like me. But don't expect like a lot of oh my gods or gotchas. I just don't think you're going to see that. But that's just my opinion. But again, Andrew Reich and I went to a deeper dive on about 2 or 3 episodes ago. Check out the descriptions, placetobe.podbean.com, or go back into your podcast catchers, and it's in the description. It's sometime in the last 2 or 3 episodes of the show we talked about the doc. So, but anyway,
it's interesting that you say that there's not a lot. There's a couple of things that come out, and I think that's where this topic has come from, because it came out of something that really wasn't knowledge to a lot of people. I'd never heard it before, and it came out of the McMahon series, and that was that originally when Vince McMahon was expanding the company back in sort of 83, 84, that his original choice for the number one guy in the company, the guy he wanted as his champion to pin the back of the company on, was not Hulk Hogan, but actually Dusty Rhodes. Mm-hmm. And that I had never actually heard that before. I don't know about you. I'd never heard that story before. And we've had conversations in on this show about who could have been someone that might have been considered.
Right.
And we talked about guys like Kerry and Kerry Von Erich and Junkyard Dog. But, I'd never heard that Dusty Rhodes was actually Vince's original first choice guy to lead the company. Had you heard that before, the documentary?
Honestly, no, I hadn't. I will say that, yes, from a wrestling perspective, I know Vince loved Dusty. Obviously, Vince's dad loved Dusty, Vince Sr. Not enough for him to be world champion. Because Vince was Vince Sr. And they do get into Vince, and I enjoyed this part, Dave. They did get into how Vince Jr. was not a fan of his dad's old world thinking. He thought that Dusty probably should have beaten superstar Billy Graham for the world title. It's somewhere in that 77, 78 run. But Vince Sr. loved Bob Backlund. Loved Bob Backlund. And Vince Jr. just did not see anything with him at all. At all. And that's why the minute Vince bought the company, he jobs to the Iron Sheik.
And that's I guess where we bring the basis. We don't want to go back and have Dusty beat Superstar, but
no.
Our question for this first part is, what if Dusty Rhodes was the guy who led the WWF on their national expansion? What if it was Dusty and not Hulk Hogan that was given the world title and made the main event player for Vince McMahon's national expansion? Now, just as a bit of a precursor in some of my prep, here's another thing I don't know if you were aware. You might be aware of it, but it's probably not something that's at the forefront of your mind. But May 1983, Madison Square Garden, Dusty Rhodes actually had an appearance at MSG on a WWF house show. He fought Samu in the ring and obviously won. But I didn't even realize I had probably read that result before. I probably heard that he was in there at that point, but for just a one-off show, it had never clicked in my mind that Dusty was popped into the company in 83 at any point. So I found that interesting. And there's been some speculation starting to go around now that might have been Vince testing the waters to see whether or not Dusty could be used and what he could do with him. Obviously, Dusty didn't stay. But what if Dusty was given the title run? How would that look? And would it have the same impact if Dusty was champ versus what we have gotten when Hulk Hogan was given the title? I thought that would be an interesting thing to consider, because you've got two very different types of guys. While both very, very charismatic, great interviews, can talk people into a building.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dusty has a very different physique, and Dusty was probably a better in-ring technician than Hogan was. I don't think there'd be a lot of people that would deny that. His NWA career would highlight that. But then on the flip side, Dusty's a heck of a lot older. 83 is the back end of his career, so 83, 84. So what would it look like? Yeah, let's throw it out there just to start this idea of Dusty being brought in as the player. You've already mentioned that we know Vince Jr. loved Dusty, so and he said that was his first choice. 83 Dusty going into 84. Like, what does he bring? What would he bring to the World Wrestling Federation if they look to use him in that way? Well,
to give a little precursor, I'm on the historyofWWE.com. My good friend Richard Land, of course, formerly, not him, he's not formally, but the site, of course, formerly run by my man Graham Cawthon. Dusty was in, just to broaden it, Dave, Dusty had 6 WWF matches in 1983. So May 20th in Houston, he lost to Nick Bockwinkel, which is very strange since Nick Bockwinkel was in the AWA at the time. Then the match you're talking about against Samula at the Garden on May 23rd. Then on July 17th, he and Angelo Mosca defeated Purple Haze and Kevin Sullivan at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium. So obviously, Vince was working with Eddie Graham. Well, you know how Vince loved the Graham family. That was also very well documented on the doc. So obviously they were working in Florida together. Then on July 19th at the Tampa Armory, Dusty and Blackjack Mulligan beat Elijah Akeem and Kareem Muhammad. Then July 30th, he's at MSG in a six-man against the Samoans and Samula against, he's with Andre and Ivan Putski. And then in the last time he was there was September 1st, 1983 in Jacksonville. He and Barry Windham defeated Ron Bass and Joe LeDuc. So probably half of the matches that were, quote, technically WWF were
Florida.
Yeah, Florida crossovers. Because as was very well documented on the Netflix, Vince loved the Grahams. Those were his guys when he was younger. He loved Dr. Jerry and Eddie, and he loved the Grahams. So he obviously had a good relationship with Eddie Graham before Eddie sadly committed suicide early the following year, early 84. So he did love Dusty. So, all right. So let's say that Dusty, I mean, as the, quote, American dream, if Dusty walked into that building, Dave, on January 23rd, 1984, dropped the bionic elbow on the Sheik instead of the leg drop, and won the WWF title, I think that place would go just as batshit as it did for Hogan. I don't think there's any doubt about that. No doubt about it.
Especially at that time, you know, that absolutely. I got to agree with that. Like you said, the American dream. He was known throughout the country. So absolutely, if he was in that match against the Iron Sheik, I think he would have got the same reaction.
Correct. Yep. I think Vince wouldn't have had to try as hard to get Hogan over because to get Dusty over because Dusty already was. So I think he would have settled in to similar feuds. My first question is, what kind of chemistry could he and Piper have had? That's the guy in 84, Dave. That's the guy, the hot rod.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because 84 is a build to Hogan Roddy's is the eventual destination. They, look, Dusty and Hot Rod, I don't know if they ever worked together in Florida or in Crockett or anywhere. It would have been in Crockett, I guess. And they don't know that they were really together in ring at the same time. But certainly, I think their styles would have meshed well together. Like Dusty was known to go up against some pretty big brawlers. I mean, he had classic feuds with guys like Abdullah the Butcher and some of those sorts of guys, Kamala and stuff in Florida and that. So he could be known to brawl. He could be known to get wild in the ring, and that's what Roddy's WWF heel persona was, brawling wild in the ring. I think Dusty would have played well. Dusty was always a great seller of the onslaught attack. So he would have given Roddy a lot of chance to shine, and battling on the microphone, the two of them going at each other on the microphone. We already know there are a few. If Roddy's considered one of, if not the best talker in history, certainly in the 80s, Dusty, you're really talking about like Dusty, Hogan, and Piper are probably the three best talkers in the 80s. In terms of talking people into rings. And Hogan was only just developing it in the in the early 80s, whereas, Dusty had locked it in for years. He had it down pat. So I think he and Roddy would have been a great matchup at the time. I think it would have been intriguing. I think it would have drawn people in.
I think totally. I think you would have had different promo deliveries. Obviously, Dusty was an exceptional word player, whereas Hogan obviously did a lot of yelling and histrionics and flexing the guns and everything. Whereas Dusty was just one of the most eloquent promo cutters in the business, no doubt about it. I think they would have had a good back and forth. My thing is, I think Dusty would have kind of done what Hogan did in '84. I think he would have bounced around. I don't know if Dusty would have been well suited to the big man, little man feuds like Hogan. Remember, Hogan spent a lot of '84 wrestling Big John Studd, couple of Bundys.
Well, actually, if you look at his early '84, he's actually, when he first comes to the company, Studd and Bundy's not there yet. Studd's not actually doing a heck of a lot, and when he does, he's actually more against Andre. A lot of Hogan's early matches are rematches with the Sheik,
right?
Matches with Paul Orndorff, Dr. D. That's his sort of his early, and a couple of matches with Morocco. Like, they're his early in-ring battles. And again, I think Dusty would have just matched up just as well with all those guys. I think as they started that expansion and started bringing all the guys in,
right?
This is, I think, where what you were just saying, when they start bringing in the Bundys and the Kamalas and the big guys to take on Hogan, to give him that, the threat to the big superhero Hogan. Would they have? You really? I think this is where we're getting to, is to keep Hogan to make him as big as they did. So he went through the early guys, then he had Piper, then he was doing the Bundys and the Studs, and started to move into the bigger guys who could threaten a muscle-bound superhero. They built Hogan up to be this superhero that almost you needed these massive monsters to come in to challenge him. Dusty's not the superhero. He can be super charismatic and super popular, but he's not the superhero. So do you need to be bringing in those sorts of guys to threaten Dusty because no one else counts? Or can you bring in some of the smaller guys? Like, do the guys like Greg the Hammer Valentine become more of a threat to Dusty because, Dusty is a little bit bigger around the belly and, isn't as muscle bound. So it's not as vital to have the monster.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I feel like as the year progressed and Hogan, because I do know in '84 in the summertime, I know Studd and Hogan had some battles because it's on the first Hulkamania tape. I think they had like a cage match in St. Louis at the Keel. I think
around July. I think those started to happen.
Right. I think Orndorff and Dusty I'm sure they battled in Florida, so they're probably be comfortable with each other. I just think the pool of villains would be slightly different for Dusty because he's not that big. He's not Hulk Hogan in that aspect. He's just the common man working hard with his hands. No polka dots, by the way. Let's be very clear. We are not talking. Dusty will not be wearing polka dots, and there'll be no vignettes. There'll be no vignettes of him serving pizzas or driving a garbage truck. No. Dusty would be the Dusty, son of a plumber from Austin, Texas, with his American Dream, wearing his David Allen Coe hats and his skull jacket. And I don't know about that though. I mean, maybe he would. He did used to wear a Boston Celtics jacket a lot when he cut promos because Ric Flair was a heel, so he had to wear the Lakers. I don't know why the Lakers were heels, but
you could see Dusty. Like, I think the common man concept, I think, would have been played up a bit more. Like, he would have been the American Dream, but I think Vince would have played up the everyday aspect of him. He is the common guy. He is the son of a plumber. He's risen from the very bottom. He's worked hard, just like all of you fans. Like, you could really, I think Vince would play up that common element to him without going the full extreme of what we got in '89. I think you would get that. But I could see him coming in almost John Cena style of wearing the local sports teams' football jerseys and baseball shirts and basketball tops to fit the local area.
I agree with you on that, definitely. And I think he would wear, he wore more Southern guys. He wore NASCAR guys when he was in Crockett. He would wear Harry Gant, the band, because when he wore the Skull Bandit hat or the Skull Bandit jacket, it was Harry Gant, who was a NASCAR driver, amazing NASCAR driver as well. But I think you wouldn't see as many Southern things. He did wear, I have to say, I used to see a lot of promos in Crockett where he'd wear like a Bruce Springsteen t-shirt or something like that. So I definitely think Dusty could very comfortably adapt to the Northeast setting of pop culture. I think I can see him
actually that could be really important, because you talk about wearing the Bruce Springsteen stuff. It's sort of July '84 when the Cyndi Lauper connection is really pushed on television.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, can you imagine? And while they wanted to put the focus on the women and they utilized Wendy Richter, that the feud started with Captain Lou, but we all know that Hogan was latched into that later down the track, especially moving into late '84, early '85. But I can just picture Dusty wearing a Cyndi Lauper shirt, a Cyndi Lauper t-shirt to help promote that connection and the rock and roll wrestling connection concept. Dusty would be perfect to come out wearing different rock and roll shirts.
I concur. I think Dusty, I will say this, if we're talking about the whole MTV thing, I do think that Dusty would could settle into that just as much as Hogan did, if not better. I think Dusty would, if you kept going and if we kept the same trajectory and we had, say, Dusty and Mr. T against Piper and Orndorff at WrestleMania 1, I still think it would fit. I still think it would be amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Dusty would totally be comfortable with being on Saturday Night Live. I think that would be no problem at all. I think all that stuff would fit perfectly. I think, again, he would be a great promo. I think he'd be good in the pop culture interviews. So I think from a PR perspective, I think Dusty would fit very well with Vince's vision, even more than Hogan in the beginning. The only drawback, and I kind of alluded to it when you and I were chatting before we went on the air, is his age.
Yeah.
Dusty would not have been world champion till February 5th, 1988, when he got screwed by Andre and the plastic surgery. My take is I think Dusty would have probably dropped the belt to somebody in the back end of '85. And then maybe he gets one last run at WrestleMania 2. Now, here's the thing. In our alternate universe here, Dave, in this looking glass, we don't have Dusty and Bundy because that match would be abysmal. I think the original choice, and you know what I'm about to say because you know it perfectly. The original guy that Vince wanted to main event WrestleMania 2, and you know who that was. We talked about it on the show a few times in discussing various case studies. I think Dusty would be able to get him because Dusty's got the connection. I think that at the back end of the summertime, because I don't think Piper wanted the belt, I think the back end of the summertime, Vince signs and gets Nikita Koloff.
Yeah.
And I think Dusty drops the belt to Nikita Koloff at the Wrestling Classic. And then we have a long build for the next, 5 months to WrestleMania 2 in the LA Coliseum. Would it be in a cage? Yeah, it'd be bloody as fuck. You know that.
Yeah.
That would be a bloodbath. And I think Dusty wins back the world title in maybe his last crowning moment, excuse me, as world champion, holds the belt, 4 or 5 months, and I think by the summer or early fall, he drops the belt to somebody else, and then maybe he drops it to a heel Andre. Maybe Andre turns heel a little earlier. And then somebody comes in and beats Andre at WrestleMania 3. That's entirely possible.
Yeah,
But
I don't know that I'd agree with that line, because the Andre heel turn was all about the passing of the torch to Hogan, and
that is true. Correct.
He's not gonna pass a torch to Dusty because Dusty's nearing retirement. I think.
Oh no, no. I'm not saying no, Dave. I'm not saying Dusty beats Andre back at WrestleMania 3. I'm not saying that. You get somebody else.
I'm not thinking he turns heel at all. I think you would need to bring
someone.
Gotcha.
I see what you're saying. Oh no. I get your point.
I don't think the heel turn. I don't think the heel turn works.
No. I see what you're saying. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. No, it makes perfect sense. Nope, you're right. Yeah. Yep.
But I do think I agree with everything you've said there. It's sort of, everything, the build, like 84, very similar. He's pro wrestling, similar guys. We do WrestleMania 1 as it is. 85 to 86, it's probably a lot of, again, those similar guys that have come in, the Randy Savages, the Don Moroccos, battling against the new guy of the month or the new arrival. And then, I think that concept of bringing in Nikita and doing the American Dream versus the Russian Nightmare, that's Vince McMahon. You can just picture it. Like, I think if Dusty was his world champion, I think he would have thrown an absolute fortune at Nikita to get him in, because the American Dream versus the Russian Nightmare, that's the sort of caliber headline and stuff that you would want for WrestleMania 2. And whether you have had Dusty drop the belt before Mania, I could see him holding it all the way through to the big battle, the Russian Nightmare versus the American Dream, and as you said, he probably retains it there. But I think that would be a great WrestleMania main event for Dusty Rhodes. I think that the way Vince would have promoted that match, the highlights of it, the ability to use that moniker, the Dream and the Nightmare, and plaster that across across all the advertising, I think would have just worked to an absolute charm. And I think, WrestleMania 2 could probably have been a bigger deal with that match, I think, with Vince's promotion and a Dusty.
Totally.
But I think the big key you hit on is the fact Dusty's age. Because by 86, Dusty starts to break down in the ring. His in-ring matches are nowhere near what they used to be. And Vince would need to be looking at the succession plan. And I think you're really looking at what is the succession plan after that. You've got this national expansion happening. And I guess here's the question. If you've brought Nikita in and put a big deal behind him, do you potentially consider putting the belt on Nikita and letting this massive Russian Nightmare play the heel for the first part of 86? Either to potentially play the Russian turns American, like they did in NWA, although I don't know that works as well for Vince. Do you want him to hold the belt for a little while until you find your babyface replacement? And then I guess the question comes, who comes in? And, from what, because outside of Nikita, the only couple of people I think you could realistically consider putting the belt on who were in the company in 86 would be Savage, who is in there at that point, and IC champ. Potentially, you could put it on Paul Orndorff for a short period of time, but as heels, I don't see them getting long title runs. You need your next babyface champion, and JYD is probably past it. We know that in ring, he's probably past it,
and he was just untrustworthy.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I don't see Vince putting the title on Steamboat, and so you come to the question of Dusty may have been the initial choice, but is there any other alternative after that than to perhaps bring Hogan in? Because if he hasn't brought Hogan in, Hogan's been in the AWA, probably running as champion for a while in the AWA, but the AWA was dying. And,
totally. Yep.
And so Vince is going national. Hogan is seeing what he's done with Dusty. Does Vince bring Hogan in late 85, early 86, give him a match at WrestleMania 2 against Bud, against Bundy, against someone, put him over big, with the plan being that he dethrones Nikita Koloff and takes the title from there?
Yeah.
I don't see any other realistic alternative for Vince's World Wrestling Federation in 86 that's already in-house. I think you've got to bring someone from the outside in. And then to me, your options are you're bringing in a Hulk Hogan or you're bringing in Kerry Von Erich. And I think Kerry was too unreliable.
Oh, no, Kerry was a mess in that point. No,
absolutely.
I totally think he poaches Hogan anyway. He just poaches him 4 years later or 3 years later than he did. Because I'm sure at some point in those 3 years, Vern would have pissed Hogan off like he pissed him off in 83 anyway. Taking his money or trying to fleece him or screw him or wrestling, in 400-seat places in Medicine Hat or whatever. I'm sure at some point he would have pissed Hogan off anyway.
Yeah, and Hogan, if he was running with the title, Hogan would have known the title was probably the only thing keeping him from, basically sort of like, I can hold the title over Vern now that I've got it. I almost very much like Kurt Hennig. When Kurt Hennig it's basically make me champ or I'm going. So it'll just get to the point where Vince just go, here's the money and you've seen what I can do with Dusty. I can do even more with you. And Hogan goes, yeah, I'm dropping the title and I'm coming now.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, I definitely see that. I think Vince would know, because I feel like you can't bring Hogan in too early and he's not on top already because he's too hot. Hogan as a mid-carder doesn't fly, even at that point. So I think Vince knows that when he does put the rocket on Dusty in early 84, beats the Sheik, that he knows it is a shelf life of no more than 2 years, 2.5 years. I think he knows that by the middle of 86, middle to late 86, he knows that it's time to move on to somebody younger. Now, would Dusty stick around? Yeah. Oh, totally. I don't know if Dusty or if Vince lets Dusty go when he goes down to Crockett, or Dusty finds him more equally valuable. And Dusty never goes to Crockett.
There's two elements to that point, I think. Element number one, I don't think Vince is going to, he's not going to make Dusty look stupid. He's not going to put him in polka dots. So having given up the title, you could see Dusty still having some runs with guys. You bring in Harley Race, and Dusty and Harley can have a couple of big battles. Dusty could sort of play that going out legend, the sort of guy like he'd done previously with an Ivan Putski, like he'd done previously with a Chief J. Strongray. that number 2 babyface who still is pretty well just about unbeatable, but he's just, he's going to headline the B shows. In essence, what Andre was to Hogan in 84 and 85 and 86. He was the number 2 babyface in the company, headlines the B show. And you could see Dusty playing that role for a while and then probably being encouraged to move into a backstage role. That's what you would see Vince wanting to do with Dusty. And I guess how well he looked after Dusty might have an impact on where Dusty sees that. But the flip side of that is Dusty's personal ego. And I say that from the perspective of Dusty wanted to be a booker. And we know Dusty had done the booking, and to bring him into WWF, he wouldn't have been booking. Is it something where Dusty goes, here's an opportunity, I'll make the money, but then when the run finishes, it's like, thanks, Vince, I really appreciate it, but I would like to go back to Florida, or I'd like to do some booking, and Vince would go, well, you're not going to be doing that here. Does Dusty leave just to be able to book elsewhere?
Yes.
I think that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, I agree. I totally think it's a possibility. That was Dusty's endgame. Dusty was eventually wanted to be a head booker, an agent, a producer. He knew that. He was doing it back in the 70s in Florida. So if Vince was not going to promise Dusty a booking team slot, but then Dusty would have been gone and he probably would have gone to Crockett.
Yeah.
Because Dusty was looking at his future. He knew that his in-ring was slowly, winding down. And I think he's reaching out to Vince and going, listen, thank you for my run as champ. I know that, it's time for some of us to step aside, let some of the younger guys, continue to bring the goods. I'd like to be part of your team. And I think for Vince, and maybe this is a different rabbit hole or a different looking glass, but for Vince, I think a lot of it would be the trust that maybe a guy like Pat would have for Dusty. Could Pat and Dusty get along? Could Gorilla and Dusty? Well, Gorilla and Dusty, I think, could definitely get along. I don't think I've ever heard any stories about Gorilla and Dusty not getting along. Or an Arnie Skoland, or all those guys in like Vince's, inner circle.
Yeah.
If they feel that Dusty would be an integral asset and can work with the team, then I think he sticks around. Something tells me that I think Dusty would have eventually gone to Crockett. I think his booking philosophy just fits better in a Southern atmosphere.
I don't think he could have played second fiddle to Vince. I think in the end he would have wanted, this is the storyline I want. And he wouldn't, I don't know that Dusty could handle Vince over the top going, no, this is the direction we're actually going to go. No, that doesn't work here. I think Dusty, he might join the creative team initially, but I think in the end he'd go, look, I can't do this. I've heard stories of Jim Cornette getting frustrated at sort of his ideas being nixed or cut or changed because it didn't fit Vince's idea. And in the end, Jim Cornette needed to stop booking. And then he had his issues with Vince Russo as well. But Jim Cornette couldn't work under Vince McMahon in a booking role for too long because their ideas for how things should go were very different. And I think Dusty would be the same. He might be able to do it for a short period of time, but eventually it would just be, nah, I've got to go now. I can't do this anymore with you. But having said that, you put Dusty in Crockett in, say, late 87, early 88. And Crockett obviously wouldn't have had some of the success they had in 86, 87 because Dusty wasn't booking them then. But you bring Dusty in, now with having experienced Vince's success, like how you promote the success.
Right.
I actually would raise the suggestion that perhaps Crockett would be a much stronger company and have a much better direction and a much better promotional direction if Dusty was booking for them after spending 2 or 3 years with Vince, because he brings in his booking ideas, which aren't done to death at this point. So you're not sick of the Dusty finish and you're not sick of how he does it. But now he's also bringing in, well, this is how Vince got successful. So if I take some of those ideas with my stories, who knows what could happen? I think you're looking at some true potential greatness.
I think that Dusty would do wonders for a guy like Savage. We don't know. I mean, I don't know if they try to return. I would have probably trusted Dusty. Let me word it this way, Dave. I probably would have trusted Dusty to do a better job of booking the Mega Powers Explode than it did. Dusty would have made it so Savage was the total heel, and that was that. It would not have been booked the way that it ended up being booked, which was almost like a 50-50, and then Gorilla shoved it down your throat that you had to root for Hogan. I don't think Dusty would make it so ambiguous. Well, not that they made it ambiguous on purpose, but I think Vince would have done, or Dusty would have done a better job helping the team really put Savage over as the legit villain without any preconceived notions. That's what I trust Dusty for. I also trust Dusty to book a good tag division. I don't think if Dusty was booking through the back end of the 80s, I don't think Demolition would have had the... Sorry, Dave. I don't think Demolition would have had the titles as long as they did in that first run from WrestleMania 4 till whatever it was, July of 89, when they finally lost to the Brainbusters. I think they would have lost it. I think they would have lost it at some point before that. And got it back eventually, but I think they would have lost it at some time before that.
Well, you just convinced me on the reason why Dusty should never have booked in WWF.
We could have added. Well, think about it, Dave. Demolition could have had more title reigns. They did have like Dudley Boys, 12, 13 title reigns, and they would have been even. They would have definitely been in the Hall at that point because Bill Eadie probably would have. Axe would have probably trusted Dusty better than anybody else. So who knows? But anyway, I think that's what it comes down to. If Dusty was Vince's guy and he comes in and he wins the title in 84 and has a solid, 2.5 year run from 84 to mid to late 86, then works in some mid-card feuds and feuds with a Greg Valentine or feuds with a Rick Rude or whatever. But eventually I think he would go to Vince and go, listen, I'm cooked. My in-ring is over. It's time for us to start pushing the young guys. But I'm ready to join the booking team. I do feel like that would have had to be promised ahead of time. I don't think Dusty would have just walked up to Vince and said, "So, I think I want to book." I think that would have been like all right, if Vince comes in, if Vince signs Dusty to be the man for those couple years, I think that Dusty would have had to have been promised ahead of time. I'll be champ. I'm looking forward to it. I'm your guy, baby. But I think he would have said, and eventually, though, by say 87, in maybe even early 88, it would be time for me to step aside and join the booking team. I think that's feasible. And how long Dusty books, that I don't know. But I think that Dusty would probably have stayed in the WWF for a long time. Now, we would not have gotten the awesome Dusty. We would not have never gotten the Hard Times promo. We never would have gotten the killer main event at Starrcade 85, but that's okay. I think I'm accepting of that because they would have done something else. Maybe in this, Dave, in this alternate universe, Magnum TA doesn't get in the car accident.
Maybe not.
And he is, and he's Crockett's guy as a on the babyface side. So, let us know what you think. Could Dusty have been a solid mid-'80s world champion for Vince as he began the national expansion? Dave and I emphatically say, yes, I think he would. It would be a different route. It'd be a much shorter route, be more like an express or a sprint than a marathon. But I do think it's something that can be discussed and executed over, say, a 3-year period. From when he wins the belt from the Sheik in January of 84 until, say, September or October of 86. So, I don't know, Dave. What do you think? I think we were pretty fairly realistic in these assessments.
Yeah, I think that was a good assessment.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right.
This one coming up, number 2. This might be interesting because we're going to definitely be changing a ton of stuff. A ton of stuff. For good or for better or for worse. Let's put it that way. What do we got? Case number 2.
Case number 2, another interview that's happened in the last, at the time we're recording this, in the last 4 to 6 weeks. As always, there's always good interviews and good sound bites that Hulk Hogan likes to provide us with, and over the years, I think a lot of people have come to enjoy Hulk Hogan's distorted remembering of history, and how that things don't always seem to be the way Hogan remembers it. I think my favorite, obviously, Hogan being well known for perhaps not always telling the truth in his interviews about his remembering of history. And my favorite one is him trying to claim that he went out to WrestleMania 3, thinking that Andre wasn't going to play ball and he didn't know who was going to win the match until the end of the match when Andre didn't kick out of the leg drop. Now, I'm sorry, but there's no way Vince is putting anyone in the ring unless he's got it worked out. The whole point of the angle was for Andre to put Hogan over. So don't get me started on that. And his exaggeration of Andre's weight and size. And I think Hogan injured his back in the first 3 seconds trying to slam Andre and was never the same again. And that's got to be my favorite one. But just in the last one, and I have heard this one come out before, but it's come out again recently, is Hogan saying that he pitched to Vince in 1990 that he should have been the original Triple H, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And that actually what his pitch was that at the end of WrestleMania VI, after losing the title to Ultimate Warrior, he comes back into the ring and attacks Warrior, turning heel in the process and becoming Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Now, I highly, highly doubt that he ever pitched turning heel to Vince McMahon, considering that we know he was so resistant to it when Bischoff put it out there in WCW.
Right.
So I don't buy that there's any truth to Hogan putting the idea out there. But as an idea, I think it's a very interesting thing to consider. What if Hogan did turn heel after WrestleMania 6? At the end of the WrestleMania 6 match, as Warrior is celebrating, Hogan comes in and turns on him and becomes a heel. Where does things go? Where does life for Hogan go? Where does the company go as we move forward? Now, we also know Hogan is about to go off to film a movie, and I think we need to keep that. That was the reason he dropped the title, was because he was going off to film.
Correct.
So I want to keep that element in. He's still going to film his movie, so we're going to have this gap of time up to SummerSlam, but Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, as a heel in 1990. What does it look like? Yeah, I could see it working. I could see Hogan. If you really wanted to get Warrior over as the babyface, Hogan coming in and turning on Warrior at the end of 6, I think would have been a very interesting outcome. And then you play it out from there. Hogan coming on TV, talking up that he's the great star, that that arrogance, that the entitlement, that Warrior beat me. This was a fluke. I wasn't really prepared. Because I was preparing for my movie. I wasn't ready. And so you could use television over the next few weeks to really build the character. And I think that it would make for a very interesting idea. Right. Hogan as a heel in 1990. Would it work?
Well, there is quite a bit of moving around, because if we have a Hogan heel turn in 1990, the entire landscape of the World Wrestling Federation completely changes from the prime Earth, because if Hogan's a heel, you get no Slaughter turns heel, you get no Iraq War thing, you don't get any of that jazz. That's gone, and probably for the better.
Yes.
So depends how far out you do it. Now, do you have, say, Hogan comes back, starts kind of rebuilding him, really laying it on thick as a heel, and we get to WrestleMania 7, Warrior is still champion, and this time Hogan actually beats him, and Hogan is the heel champion. Maybe he's with Bobby, which would be pretty funny.
Does Warrior do we get that far? Do we even get that far? Does Warrior get to WrestleMania 7 as champ? So I ask it for this reason. And I think Warrior's title reign might look a little bit better. I mean, we've talked about Warrior's title reign before, but as you said, the landscape changes. Number one, you don't get the Hogan Earthquake feud. So I think Earthquake feuds with
that is true.
Warrior. So I think Warrior is facing Earthquake, and that becomes your SummerSlam main event. Warrior and Earthquake can settle their score. And I think that works, because this is I would do this. You've got to send Hogan out. You've got to give a reason for Hogan being off television to film his movie. So he talks up he's talking up his arrogance. He's talking up that he's the guy that he shouldn't have lost. Who's Hogan's best friend at this point? Brutus Beefcake. And I think Brutus is sort of, what have you done, Hulk? What are you doing? And so your Saturday night's main event after WrestleMania, I think, becomes Hogan Beefcake. And Hogan just lays waste to Beefcake. Beats him up, probably take him out with a chair, foreign objects. Beefcake is a bloody mess. But the outcome is that Hogan gets suspended for over brutality, for attacking a ref. It can be all sorts of suspending for heel notions, but you suspend Hogan for a couple of months. Hogan's suspended, and then you get the TV starts to say Hogan can come on for interviews as you get closer to SummerSlam, saying, I'm coming back. I'm coming back at SummerSlam. I'm going to be at SummerSlam. It could be an in-ring vignette. It could be, maybe it's an in-ring vignette. Maybe it's a brother love. He comes back at SummerSlam. Maybe it's an in-ring return. Maybe he returns and he's up against. I mean, who is he up against? You know, a Jake the Snake or Roddy Piper. Who knows? It could be. There you go. Bring him back against Roddy. Heel Hogan versus babyface Roddy. How would that be?
Well, it's funny. I think it would look better than it did in 96 and 97, that's for sure. Because Piper got very hot very quick as a babyface.
Yeah.
And if Hogan is really laying it on, which I think he would because he does business, we think, brother. I think they could put on tell a pretty good story.
Well, you think of the story because Piper was transitioned to commentary right before SummerSlam when Jesse left. So the whole summer, when you bring Piper in, it all becomes about Piper sort of going, Hogan thinks he's this big movie star. I'm a movie star. I've made great movies. Hogan's made nothing. And so you could build to this Hogan Piper match at SummerSlam. That could be your underneath match. Hogan is the heel. That's his comeback match against Roddy Piper. They can brawl. They can be bloody. They can lay waste while both of them were still able to go in the ring. I think it looks fantastic. But when Hogan comes, I want to throw this little monkey wrench in. So that's Hogan's return match. I think we don't see Hogan on anything except pre-recorded interviews before SummerSlam. Maybe a week or two before SummerSlam, he appears on Brother Love to help promote the match, but nothing else. He's no in-ring, nothing, because you want to keep it all building to the heel dynamic. But just to add a bit of fun to it, Hogan, we need to help put over Hogan as a heel. Right. Hogan doesn't need a manager. He doesn't need a manager. A manager doesn't work for Hogan because he can talk, and we all know it. So what if Hogan had a bodyguard? What if Hogan hired a bodyguard, someone who was known to the WWF fans, really couldn't do anything in ring, but his size and presence would certainly help play into the concept of the movie star? What if Hogan had a bodyguard named Zeus?
Ha! I knew it! I fucking knew it! I was going to say Zeus, and holy crap, I thought you were going to mess with me. Dave, that would be fantastic. If 2 years later, Hogan
Not even two.
uses Zeus.
It's 12 months. 12 months later, Zeus is Hogan's boy. And Zeus helps Hogan beat Piper. And so he gets a really cheap, Zeus hits him, whatever. Piper's a bloody mess, basically, left laying. But there's your SummerSlam match. And then they can build, that can go on a little bit, the house show circuit. They can have, obviously, the return at Survivor Series, because that's what you do. They can both head up teams at Survivor Series while Warrior's dealing with Earthquake and Rick Rude and all the other guys. But after Survivor Series, or even at Survivor Series, Hogan announces, I want my title back. I'm coming for my title. And so the build then becomes, like you said, we can then start building to WrestleMania, because Hogan has laid claim. I want my title back. And maybe even calls the shot. And at WrestleMania, I want my title shot. I want my rematch. Never got it. Frank Tunney, you're giving me my rematch, or Zeus is coming to you. You could do it on Brother Love. Frank Tunney being interviewed on Brother Love, and Zeus and Hogan turn up and basically intimidate him into agreeing to the rematch at WrestleMania. And yeah, I think you build to that WrestleMania rematch, and Hogan gets his win back, cheats like crazy, and beats Warrior for the title at WrestleMania 7, and we now have a heel Hulk Hogan as champion, which is where you were leading to before.
Right. And no, I like that. I like that idea a lot. That's pretty much what I was thinking, but I don't know. I still can't wrap my head around Zeus as his manager. That's just mind blowing. That's
Not
just
as his
absolutely
manager,
mind.
as his bodyguard.
I mean, as his bodyguard. My bad. His bodyguard. Yes. No, you're right. Because I don't think Zeus does not have a manager's license.
Are you gonna stop him, McMahon? Are you gonna get out there and tell him he can't be there?
Yep. Beef cake Baba. Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. Now, out of that, we get into the summer of '91. We just talked about this guy, Dave, because what comes up now is, okay, he's brand new to the company. And we promoted it on our last episode, and we gave this guy a ton of pub, a ton of looking glass opportunities. When he arrives in the WWF in the summer of 1991, Dave, do we begin the build to heel Hogan with the title at WrestleMania 8 in Indianapolis against Sid Justice?
Oh. You can just picture that would be a sensational build.
Yeah. Right?
So we come out of WrestleMania 7, and Hogan is now the champ, and probably the Saturday night's main event. Maybe he beats on Brutus Beefcake again, or he beats up, we're in 1991 now. Maybe he beats up Kerry Von Erich. Has a title match against Kerry Von Erich and beats him down and sends Kerry on his merry way back out of the company. Probably a match against the Big Boss Man is on the agenda. We need a Saturday night's main event there, and we build to SummerSlam 91. We've got a match. We've got a match made in hell. Maybe it's Hogan, and maybe you've got your tag team main event there. Maybe you're talking about Hulk Hogan and who could be his partner? Could it be maybe a heel Sergeant Slaughter in the company? Who knows?
Right.
Could it be maybe it's Earthquake? Maybe it's maybe it's the $1 Million Man. Maybe Hogan becomes buddy because maybe some of the backstory we get is the $1 Million Man is helping finance Hogan's movies. So whatever it is, but we have our tag team match against Warrior, and Warrior's partner is Sid. And I think that's, you get that, and Sid gets the win over Hogan. Maybe it's just a DQ. Maybe Sid is, getting the better of Hogan in the match, and Zeus interferes.
Sure.
And Hogan gets DQ'd, and Hogan leaves the ring, and he's screaming and yelling at Sid, what are you doing here? You don't belong here, and all that. And Sid and Warrior pose and cheer to the crowd afterwards. And so coming out of your tag team main event, a match made in hell, you've got this build now of Sid he's got that buffer. I'm coming for you, Hogan, and maybe Hogan doesn't want anything to do with him. I'm not. Right. You're not getting a shot. I'll fight all these other guys, and he starts, going through the babyface roster. Jake the Snake. He beats up on, at this point, Randy Savage is a good guy again, so he can have a match again. Maybe, faces Savage at Survivor Series. Savage returns to the ring and faces Hogan, and this Tuesday in Texas, it could be, all sorts. You just run the gamut. You've got all your baby faces. Hacksaw Jim Duggan gets a shot. He just beats everyone, but Hogan is refusing to face Sid. Won't have a bar of it, and maybe even puts a bounty on Sid's head. And so the Undertaker goes after Sid, and Jake turns heel going after Sid to get the money in, and all sorts of things. And then at the Royal Rumble, they announced that the winner of the Royal Rumble 1992 is going to get a shot at Hollywood Hogan's title at WrestleMania. And that's where Sid overcomes 29 other guys to get the shot that Hogan has refused to give him since he lost by DQ at SummerSlam. And your main event is set for WrestleMania, Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice for the WWF title.
Sign me up. Sign me up. The other thing that happens, what were your thoughts? I'm trying to recap in my head your thinking. Did you mention Ric Flair?
No, I haven't.
No, we have not, have we?
No.
What do we do in that situation? Does that signing even happen? I'm thinking about that, and I had a feeling I was trying to think back. I was writing something down, and I was trying to think if you had said something.
Well, if we go from
So-
if we go from a world perspective of what was happening with Flair and Jim Herd, you'd have to think
Right.
that he comes in. Flair comes in, but does he come in as the real world champion? Or does he
Right.
just come in as the nature boy? Does he come in as a heel? Or does he come in as a baby face coming after Hollywood Hulk Hogan?
Would he work out as a baby face in the WWF? Maybe? Be very interesting.
I think it would be hard to bring him in as a top baby face. He's got the charisma for it, but his character, the nature boy character, doesn't, as an initial bring in, I don't think it plays to the baby face. I think he would need to have come in and got the fans' respect before he would be able to make that turn.
Right.
But I think you would bring Flair in not as the real world champion. He would just come in as the nature boy.
Correct.
Yeah. I think Flair probably
Yeah.
gets severely impacted by Hogan being heel champion, being Hollywood Hogan, because a lot of what Flair, a lot of the arrogance, a lot of the preening, a lot of the talk himself up, the way Flair presents himself on arrival, that's almost what Hogan would have to be doing as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So you're going to end up with very similar characters, just with different body
Right.
sizes.
That's the fascinating part for me when it comes to a Hogan heel run. I feel like would the fans be behind, these Northeast fans? Flair's reputation precedes himself with the enemy, with the competition. Could the fans get behind, the WWF fans get behind a babyface Flair?
I
do you
think Flair has I do think Flair has the ability to do it. But it's going to take a lot more work, I think,
Right.
to do it. But it would be an interesting thing to play if you brought Flair in, and maybe you bring him in from the start. Hogan, you've been running for me for years. I've been coming for you. I've been calling you out for years, Hogan. You've been running for me. Forget about Sid. I'm here. And maybe Hogan, maybe you could bring him in as the baby face. You could build him up with very similar to the character that it would be very similar nature boy to what returned to WCW in '93. Playing on reputation and, that he's the best in the business. I think you could play into that. 1993 Ric Flair could be brought in, if he's coming in with the "you've been running for me for years, Hogan, and I'm coming for you," and you could build to a match between the two, and maybe that's your Royal Rumble match. Maybe Flair and Hogan face off at the Royal Rumble while Sid is winning the Rumble, or the Sid face Flair at the Rumble. Sid face Hogan at the Rumble, and Flair still win Rumble 92 to set up Hogan Flair, babyface Flair versus heel Hogan.
That's weird. That is so weird. I don't know if I could wrap my head around that. That would be weird. I feel like, though. Go ahead, Dave. Good.
No, you go. You feel like.
Oh, I was gonna say, I just feel like. Excuse me. Oh, pardon me. My only concern would be. I feel like if you have Sid in the company, I think it would be hard for. I think it would be hard for you to not have him, the guy that Hogan faces at WrestleMania.
I agree. I agree, and I don't. And as I said before, I don't think Flair coming into WWF in 1991, mid 91, as a babyface works. I think he would have to come into heel, and you would just have to. Flair basically becomes the guy you build underneath to become Sid's first challenger. That's what I think you have to do with Flair. Flair comes in with the idea that, yes, he can still face the Roddy Pipers and the Ricky Steamboats and the various guys as sort of an upper mid card. He becomes the number 2 heel on the roster, but you're getting him ready to become Sid's first challenger. That's what I think Flair's trajectory becomes.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like you have to build to an eventual Flair face turn. But I think out of the gate, I think he still has to be a heel. And I don't think he's a guy that you want facing Hogan. So I definitely think that the best option for a heel Hogan going into 92 at WrestleMania 8 would be Sid. That would have been interesting to add to our Sid pod, though.
Yeah, it would have.
I didn't even think of that. That would have been fascinating.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and I think that scenario that plays out because if you've got Hogan has been this massive heel for a year, and Hogan can be talking everything up about how great he is and all that, and you go into WrestleMania in 92, a match against Sid, you could actually picture Hogan putting that whole thing of, well, you've got your shot now, but it's going to be your only one. And if I can't, I'm so confident that if I can't beat you, I'll leave the company. I'll go. I will just go and make movies in Hollywood, and you won't see me around anymore. And so when Sid wins the title from Hogan, that allows you to send this heel character off to pasture, and he disappears to the point that 12 months later, the fans are probably going to be eager for Hogan to return, and you can go back to your, Hulkamania, Hulkster, superhero character. You can go back to the babyface coming back to save the company from Yokozuna. I think that would work, and save his friend from Money Inc. I think you create that longing for him if he goes away. So I think you're going to get a good 12 months out of Hollywood Hulk Hogan as a heel in WWF. But after that, really that character would. It's almost like a swan song for Hogan. He comes full circle, does the heel thing, leaves, knowing that the fans are going to want him back at some point, and that's when he returns when the fans want it, because he'll be cheered again.
Yeah. That was my. I'm glad you brought that up on the back end, because I would be curious. Because eventually you're gonna have to return him babyface, and I'd be curious how you would do that. You wouldn't just do what WCW did, which is give him 6 months off, and he just shows up in a yellow T-shirt. No, we hear it through the looking glass. We don't take the shortcuts. We build to a big moment. We don't just have some guy take a vacation and then just show up. No, it's not the way that works.
Oh, I think you're looking at what happened in real. That's when you could bring it back, because if, like I said, Hogan goes, I'm out of here. I've lost. I'm making movies. You'll never see me again if I lose the Sid. He loses the Sid, so you don't even have to have a farewell on TV. He's gone. And then 12 months later, you've got Money Inc. beating the absolute snot out of Brutus Beefcake. And you don't have to do, I wouldn't do the telephone angle, but it's that sort of like, Money Inc. can brag about it the week after, and Brutus has got no friends and all that. And they could be in the ring talking it up, and then Real American starts playing. And I think Hogan coming back into the arena to confront the guys that hurt his former best friend, I think, would play off. And then his interview is, I was at home. I was making movies, but I saw the way you treated the guy who was my best friend.
Right.
And I saw what you did to him. And that was so wrong, because he's hurt because of the accident, because he was just trying to make a living for himself. And it made me realize that all the money in the world, can't get in the way of friendship. And I'm here to stand up for my friend. And Hogan's back as a babyface.
Yeah.
And goes on to have one of the worst matches in the world at WrestleMania 9 against Money
Inc. Yeah, that we can't avoid. I think, Dave, you did an exemplary job with that, because, again, I wonder if we will have the same problem with Hogan trying to be a heel like in 2001 with Steve Austin trying to be a heel, and still getting a decent smattering of babyface cheers, because fans just love to cheer. But betrayal. The fans feel betrayed. We've cheered for you. We followed you. We got behind you. We went to the ends of the earth for you. And now you, in the end, just used us for the money. The money, as Slick would say. That's a possibility. If the fans can sign up for that, then then I think that would end up being a killer feud if the fans could sign up for that, Dave.
Yeah.
I think I could see that. Well, I think we should leave it at these two tonight. I think these were two exemplary examples of shifting gears when it came to the WWF Championship, and see what would happen when someone else had the ability to carry the torch in another world. The third one, the one we were going to do, we're not going to mention it now. I think maybe we'll save it. Either save it for November, or we could stick it with the mailbag. I think
it'd be good with the one to stick into the mailbag group.
Okay, so we won't say what it is. We'll do that one in December. As Dave always says, he's lurking, as you always say, around our Facebook pages, Place to Be and the Place to Be Nation. So you can find him, hit him up, let him know your thoughts on on our theories tonight. What is your thoughts on Dusty as champion in the mid '80s in WWF, or Hogan turning heel 6 years before he actually did? Let us know. Hit us up on a private message on the Police Be Nation or my own messenger, as well as Dave. Dave, I saw some shows dropping on the Criscuolo. What have you been working on?
Yeah, we've just the latest Chronoso monthly has just dropped. The Royal Rumble 1990 review has just dropped. So jump on there and have a listen. The 1990 one, it's always good fun. One of the elements is a watch along where a group of our contributors all join together for a big watch along and representing different they sort of come in and out representing different members of different competitors in the Rumble. So that's also available on the YouTube channel. So check that out. My contribution was a little different. I encourage you to listen to it. Royal Rumble 90 had all that 10-minute long series of all the different promos that came before the Rumble itself. There's like I think I counted as like 17 different promos for, because some of our tag teams are about 22, 23 guys. Well, what I did is I ranked those from worst to best. And you can hear that on Chronoso Royal Rumble. So check that out. It just dropped the other day.
Okay. And of course, you can check me out here. Of course, Place Be Nation's main event. If you're listening to this the day it drops, there will be an episode Friday because big weekend this weekend. TNA has Bound for Glory. And then on Sunday is NXT Halloween Havoc. So speaking of Halloween Havoc, so we will that'll be on the show. That'll be on the feed on Friday. Of course, all the great shows that Luke Jennings does: Memphis Continental Wrestling Cast, Monday Night Project, Hamburg All Stars, his current limited edition In Your House Rewind, and he's got a couple of other cool shows down the pike. I love Luke Jennings. The guy's an animal. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will be back in November for another juicy topic, Journeys Uncharted Through the Looking Glass. We're not sure what yet, but that's the best part of it. We'll surprise you. And then as mentioned on Friday, in December, we will have our next mailbag episode. So stay tuned for that. Dave, always a pleasure. You're the best. Have a great month of October, everybody. Enjoy Halloween. And we will see you with the turkeys through the looking glass.